Thank you for joining us on the next episode of the Quintessential Performance Insights. This evening, I'm super excited to have Kevin Bill, Paul Thompson with us from Westminster Associates, USA and UK. And so we're going to discuss human performance from their perspectives, which I'm really super grateful for you joining me tonight. Thank you both for taking the time. Cheers. So, like every single episode, I like to get sort of a backstory for those that are watching to understand who we're speaking with, to understand how they've got to where they are, what they do, and sort of anything else they want to share about what makes you you. So I don't know which one of you want to start. I'll leave you two to fight that out.
I'll let Paul start because he was chronologically the first person for Westminster Associates.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. So hello everyone. My name is Paul Thompson. I run the UK and international side of Westminster Associates. We were born 17 years ago. My LinkedIn profile told me that in March. And we came out of the University of Westminster. That's where the name came from. My background before that was human resources. I worked with Virgin Atlantic in their infancy. I worked with the Yellow Pages, always in generalist HR roles. And then worked for a US corporate specialising in management development, quite a transactional role at the time though, all those years ago. I then was coaxed out of the corporate world by my then business partner, and we formed the business back in 2003. And fast forward to 2020, and really we've organically grown to do 3 or 4 main things with 3 main groups of people. So we tend to look at culture, collaboration, communication, and the 4th C is evading me right now. 3 C's. And we work with founders and CEOs. Kevin will talk more about that market. We do a lot of work in the USA. We work with senior leaders who themselves will have teams, and there could be specialist teams within that. And we work with individuals, coaching them as they grow and emerge through the businesses as leaders themselves. Our big thing is authenticity, and we'll probably come to speak more about that in terms of the energy that it takes to be anything other than yourself can be huge. So that's a personal thing of mine as well, is being and bringing your authentic self to the workplace. So that's me.
Cool. Thanks very much, Paul.
And I'm Kevin Bill. I run the North American side of operations. So we incorporated in the US a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now. And as Paul was saying, it was an organic growth. We found that there was definitely a need for what we were doing in the American market. So I'm based in San Francisco. So a lot of what we're looking at was especially .com based in the beginning, and what that might entail for us as far as a marketplace. Interestingly, we found a lot of growth outside of tech beyond there, other organizations, other types of industries that use it too, but the similarities are what was very interesting for us as well too. So I knew Paul through work before and got to just discussing what it might look like to expand Westminster Associates so we could service our global clients as well. Paul was working with people who had a base in the UK, but then we're having other parts of their operations in the US as well. So logistically, time zone wise, travel wise, it just became a bigger market than one person could service to. So the UK is still our core market, but differences in the US market were definitely there, and the similarities are there as well too. Similarities around business, differences would be around the way business actually transpires too. But the 3 C's Paul was talking about, the communication, collaboration, and culture, are definitely the 3 things that we're seeing are similar, no matter what the industry, no matter what the market.
Cool.
4th one is change. The 4th C is change. I've just remembered it. It was added as it kind of flows through all the rest. So
that's fine. Cool. I appreciate your introduction there. It sort of sets the scene, and I think we'll come back to some of the stuff that you just mentioned at the end there, Kevin. Sort of the similarities and the differences. Again, super excited to explore what you've seen from actually doing what you do, both of you, and sort of I'm sure the discussions that you have around it. I will sort of start off with the first question is, again, this is what I really want to get down, is like, what does human performance mean to you as individuals, and obviously from a business context as well. Kevin, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Well, that's a really interesting one. So human performance, I'm thinking, what does that mean? Performance as far as business, as far as achievement, as far as success, because that's a real question. We actually ask people we work with, what does performance mean to you, and what does success mean to you too, and what does a high performing team look like for you? Does a high performing team mean you've made your sales numbers? Does a high performing team mean your customers are happy? Does a high performing team mean that you're functioning well as a coordinated team? All those things might exist, and they, to varying degrees, and it might be the focus of one team's of their structure. It might be something to do a balance of. It might be something they're completely in their blind spot of too. But performance is a really interesting topic, because people can believe they're high performing sometimes, but also have the sense that something's missing from their team, and they can't quite sometimes put their finger on it. It's that culture part we work with organizations about too. What does it feel like to be a part of that organization? What does it feel like to be a part of that team? So that's an interesting question. I don't think we actually have one concrete answer for what performance would mean for us, but it's something we're constantly looking at. I think it's constantly shifting too, especially as organizations change and grow. Organizations are never static too. They're never in one place. They're never, at one growth. They're always at a growth point, whether they realize it or not. It's the idea too, even if you're either growing or you're regressing too. There's no sitting still. There's no stagnation. So performing is, I think, if I look at performance, it's being aware of all the things I just mentioned too, and actually balancing how those look and feel for your organization, at least in the market I'm working into. I think there are differences in the UK and the US as well too, as far as size of organization, industry of organization too, but there's definitely that balance we look at with everyone we work with as well too.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with you, and that's why I specifically asked that question, because it's so vague, and you can put that into any single context, and everyone will have a different opinion. So you've hit on loads of interesting little topics within that question. We can unpack that loads and loads and loads. Paul, how about you? And is there anything different?
Yeah, it's interesting, because our tagline when we first formed the company, which has kind of got hidden and lost along the way, was actually inspiring people to perform. That was the original tagline. And from a business perspective, because we talk to leadership teams we work with a lot about this, high performing culture is a bit like the culture word, and people throw it about and use it without actually being exactly sure what they mean by it. And we playfully will ask our own clients, what do they mean by a high performing culture? And typically for us as a business, though, the way we like to position it is almost an equal mix of challenge and support and inspiration, I guess, as well. So providing somebody with the role modeling of behavior and the environments that they need to perform, providing them with the right amount of support, because support is different to different people, and also challenging people as well. And I think it quite often people confuse this as an either or, but they're certainly a both and. And I think with the right balance of challenge and support, that's where people, teams and organizations will get that kind of that high performing culture word that is overused. And we use the apple pie and custard, as we say here in the UK analogy. They're both great, but they taste really great together. And that's where the challenge and support thing kind of comes in.
It's a very wonderful answer. And, I love the word inspire as well. I think it's been forgotten or being trumped by the word motivation at the moment, again, with motivational speakers and all the rhetoric around that, and sort of, you can't motivate people. It's self-motivation, but you can inspire people, which is such a really powerful word. And support, again, you've touched on it there. It's like, okay, inspire people to do something different, but then support them and challenge them along the way to reach their objectives, perhaps, or to make that change that they need to change. So they're both really good and intriguing answers. I really, like I said at the start, I'd really love to explore And if there isn't any, like, don't be afraid to say there's not. If there are any sort of stark differences from America and USA, and you've both obviously operated in both environments, so hopefully we can sort of pull out on stuff, or again, like Kevin, like you said, some similarities that this is what it is, because we're all humans at the end of the day, so there will be similarities. It's just interesting to understand a bit more if there are differences or similarities. What are those? What can we look for?
I would say the one difference I've seen, because the market I operate in, would be the idea of pace, or of, I call it like, it's kind of like how quickly do we have to get things done? We don't have the luxury of time in a lot of smaller startups in the Bay Area too. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's this idea of, we think we have more time than we do. We think we have more resources than we do. It's the limitation on both of those things that I really see as the stark difference between the UK market that we deal in and the US market, just by the nature of the beast. It's really kind of a gold rush in the Bay Area as far as people getting funding, trying to start their companies up. What does that look like? How long do they have to go? And the idea of what does success look like, and how can we get there? I think it's a hard lesson for a lot of companies to learn, and it's kind of where we come into our own as consultants too, is helping them understand how to grow their organizations beyond just being 3 people in a room starting a company, and how do you actually grow from 12, 15, 20, 200, 400. And there's tipping points, or I would call real measurements you can have, and real functional measurements you can have as far as what size you get to a certain point too. And you start to have these organizational challenges as well too, but they come fast and furious, and they come more quickly than I think people are prepared to realize, or even want to realize sometimes too. They're still kind of working on the product too, and they realize they have to run a company along the way too, and their focus of what they were doing before suddenly has shifted just by the nature of the beast for them too. So that's been the one real difference I've seen in working in the Bay Area as opposed to the UK market we're working in.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's interesting. So do you think there's more opportunity in America for this, for all the stuff you're trying to say there, compared to UK? Again, I'm sort of perhaps pushing this question on you a little bit. It'd just be interesting to see what you think.
The opportunity is definitely there. It's, again, getting the message to people about what we do. I find is, I'm new, so I'm in a newer marketplace. I would say that is my focus right now, is kind of getting the word out about what we can do and what difference it can make too. For example, talking to venture capitalists, saying, you've given someone funding for an organization and they're having operational challenges right now. They're 18, 24, 36 months in, and you're trying to almost backfill the problem and backpedal a bit too. It's become a crisis at this point too. So we can talk to them and we'll say, what can you do to help us on this too? So the message I'm trying to get across to people I speak with too is, get us in earlier, make us partners in the organization, so that what we do is something that they have at their disposal from the get-go. It's a tool in their belt that they have even before they need it, and they have the language and the skill set, at least in a theoretical sense, to build the organization they need to build too. It's the idea that if you don't know it exists, you can't use it. So let us have that dialogue with you too, and engage us when it feels right for you and you're at the right point and the right size. But at least know that it's there for you, and we can be there and collaborate with you too. And we are very collaborative as an organization too. We're not someone who wants to come in and just stop by for a day and deliver a few hours of, we don't do training. It's facilitation, it's development. So we want to be partners with you and work with you in the long term too. We're long-term collaborators too, is the way we always position ourselves.
Yeah, I think, not blowing smoke up your behind, but that's the ethical way to do it, isn't it? Again, this is just my perspective, my opinion. That's an ethical way of doing it, because you have investment then into that organization, helping them achieve their objectives, helps you achieve yours. There's you can pay anyone to come in and deliver something, but again, if you're not going to take any action on the back of that training that you paid someone a lot of money to come and deliver, it's wasted money. So again, it's a mutual relationship for organisation development.
Absolutely.
Which is fantastic. And I liked your comment about language. How important have you found language to be in doing the things that you both do? And does that, although we both speak English on both sides of the Atlantic, does that pose any issues?
Oh, well, I mean, on a funny sense too, the tool we use is based in the UK. So there's parts of what we do. We have profiles that we give to people which are based in UK English. So there can be Britishisms that people are like, I don't know what this means. So there's definitely even just small nuances. A lot of the teams we work with are global too, so there's definitely the actual language issue back and forth too. But it's not even language so much as communication, I find too. It's the things that are lost in translation. It's the things that communication for us is more about. How do you work virtually? How do you work across time zones? How do you work across multiple platforms? Even now, how does the world work now that we've all gone virtual? We're doing Zoom calls too. All the body language you lose, all the communication you lose over the water cooler or the coffee machine. What does that look like for us now? So it's not the language we use per se so much as the way we do communicate and how we communicate, and being mindful about that and conscientious about making sure we're filling in the gaps of whatever we have lost. And I do think some things have been lost going virtual too. I think we're all learning what that looks like too. But it's just being mindful of how we can pick up the gap, pick up the slack on that too, and say, maybe we just check in once in a while just to see how you're doing as a person too. Maybe, because we can't go for coffee, so we have a virtual version of that too. Just have a cocktail hour. We have 20 minutes into the day and check in with what's going to. So language, that becomes the idea of language for us too. Of what are we using it for, and how are we using the tools we do have to best communicate with one another.
No, I like it. Paul, question for you here. How have you noticed communications changed since the day you started doing this type of work to where you are now? And obviously, you said at the start you've been doing this for a long time. Is there anything?
It's interesting because as Kevin was talking, I've spent a lot of years, sort of fielding calls about early days about culture. And when I say culture, I mean geographic culture. And quite often a problem will present itself as cultural differences. I'm sure us people listening have heard about this. And I've often found that there's always a subset to that underneath culture, you still have human beings and individuals that come into work every day and genuinely want to do a good job and connect with people. We're pack animals, So I think culture aside, if you can get people connected and collaborating and communicating with one another and understanding one another in the right way, they'll do anything for anyone. And if you roll that up into organizational culture, when organizations create authentically inclusive, creative, collaborative, results-oriented, whatever, agile cultures, and I use the word authentic because quite often organizations think they've got just that when they've actually got exactly the opposite. I think that's when you really get performance. That's, for us, it's all about communication and connection. How has communication changed? I think organizations have flattened. I think there's been a big shift away from positional power. So I'm the vice president, and that's why you should do what I say. To positional power. The good communicators have become the great leaders. Those leaders that can create followership through engaging people's heads and their hearts really is where people will put their feet on the ground and follow people. So I think flatter organizations, I think authentic communication, explicit communication, that's a big word that we use. Being able to comfortably have a dialogue with someone about this is what we need, this is how we'll know we'll achieve it, and this is what will happen if we don't, that accountability piece, even the best leaders, the real good leaders that we work with, still struggle with explicitness and holding people accountable. Even the guys that say they find it easy, and normally they think they're doing a good job when actually they're just being aggressive and quite rude. So being explicit is a key skill, I think, in terms of communication.
Being explicit doesn't mean you actually held them accountable. You've just been explicit, and then it's the follow-on portion that also often is missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How are you helping leaders get around that problem without sharing your secrets?
For me, it's understanding who they're trying to be explicit with. One individual can think they're being quite explicit and quite direct, but if you're doing that with an individual that doesn't even know you, they're probably perceiving you as quite rude. Mm-hmm. One individual can think they're being quite detailed and quite systematic in terms of the way they communicate. When other people might think you're chaotic, So the core of our work is helping people understand themselves first. We know ourselves best, most of us do, so that we can put ourselves into shadow and start to understand the other 75% of the world that will see things differently to us. That's when it gets good. That's when you get those aha moments, those paradigm shifts, when somebody realizes there's probably a better way of doing things.
Do you think vulnerability has a big part to play in that?
I think lack of vulnerability actually plays a bigger part for it. It's the idea of achievement I talked about earlier too. They may be very conscious of being vulnerable too, but they don't want to show that too. And I think they will think that compromise is vulnerability, when in fact it's collaboration, but it's the mistaking of the two too. And I've seen examples where any kind of me giving way to you is seen as giving up power or giving up control of where the organization is heading to, and it will backfire. Mm-hmm. I find not 10 times out of 10 people will put up with it for a bit, but not long term. And the best organizations I work with is where they're not afraid to say, I don't know the answer. I'll get back to you. We're still figuring it out. We're working on it, and people will respect you for that too. They'll actually try to help you get to that solution when you do that too, because they, like Paul was saying, people do want to come to work and succeed. Yeah. It's the ones that blindly are saying, I don't know, we'll do it my way, and you're just making something up on the spot, and people will have a sense that that's not authentic, and it will, yeah.
And that links back into the personal and positional power piece as well, because if people are hiding behind a position, they may be feeling vulnerable inside, but will then use their position to try and mask that, and it's so obvious, but the last 5 or 6 months, the COVID-19 lockdown, vulnerability has been a massive thing. Leaders that have not been afraid to show that vulnerability. It's okay to say, I don't know. There's been a lot of that going on in the last 5 months. I don't know how to engage 400 people in my growing organization virtually, and how to reach out to them all via Zoom. It's like, well, probably nobody does that well, but try. They'll thank you for it. Exactly. Somebody once said to me, it's okay to say, I don't know. Now, we stand in front of people, typically a lot of senior leaders, and I think it is okay if you're asked a question as a consultant or a facilitator to say, I don't know. Perhaps not all the time, because that's probably more of a competence. This is a kind of vulnerability issue. But it's okay. I don't know, but I'll find out. What a great answer.
But follow up on
people
that.
Start. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, but follow up on that too.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, I agree with everything you're saying. I think those that can, and that's where I was getting at the start, Kevin, is that those that are comfortable with displaying their own personal vulnerability can set an example for the organization culture, perhaps, that people can see, okay, the boss can be showing vulnerable. He's a human, or he or she is human. That's perfectly acceptable. I can be human, I can make mistakes, and I can be vulnerable. And for me, I think it helps to build trust amongst everyone, regardless of your position.
Yeah.
which then can...
In a healthy organisational culture, and I use the word a healthy organisational culture, if somebody shows weakness for the right reasons, there's not many people in this world will try and beat them while they're down. The first thing they'll try and do is support and bring them up.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of the time, and appreciate we sort of want to start rounding it up now. Just what sort of one final question, if you wouldn't mind. What excites you most about the work that you both do, doing what you do?
Making a difference to people.
Same here.
Seeing that person,
making a change.
I knew that's what the answer was going to be.
What's that, Kevin? I missed that.
Making a change.
I knew
yeah,
that.
that's how I measure success. Do we make a meaningful change for the better? That's success for me.
Or seeing that person that the organisation and that leader has written off absolutely smash it and do really, really well. And that's happened a lot over the last 5 months. People have just found their groove, and it's just been an absolute pleasure to see that. That's why I and we as a business do what we do.
Lovely. I love it. Right, both of you, thank you very much. You know, you've been really open and honest and answering my questions. I really appreciate it, and I've learned a hell of a lot from this little interaction. And you know, thank you very much for your time. It's been brilliant.
Oh, my pleasure.
Take care.